You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai and delighted to welcome back to the show Alan Orr. He's the founder of Orr Immigration Law. He is an immigration lawyer, and we enjoy having him come back with us again and again and again to separate the fact from the fiction. Welcome back, Alan.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can.
Good,
Welcome
good,
back.
good.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you for having me. Happy
Thank
Monday.
Happy Monday. Thank you for being here. Perhaps a happy Monday for a number of families who have been awaiting this decision. They dropped a number of dropped cases against LA protesters, revealing false claims from federal agents. Now, for our audience, we are not surprised that law enforcement officials were making false statements that didn't bear out in the courts. For folks less familiar with this story, U.S. immigration officers made false and misleading statements in their reports about several L.A. protesters that they arrested during those massive demonstrations that rocked the city in June. This is according to federal law enforcement files obtained by our friends over at The Guardian. Alan, I've got to ask you, what do you make of this, and how large, how how much of an issue do you think this is, not just in Los Angeles, but in a number of major cities across the country?
So we all know it's a major issue, right? We've seen the falsification of information, not just with regards to immigrant arrests and protesters, but also to just Black men every day in their cars, as we saw the Jacksonville story last week of an individual. So that's why we have said that if you're a bystander or you're around one of these things, you must record it. That's part of the duty, is to record, and maybe not to intervene, but to record, so that there is survive, be alive, and then tell the story later to get the repercussions that we're seeing now where these cases are dropped. But not only are the cases being dropped, so these are false arrests, false statements, right? So all of those things are done in your professional job, under your oath, and you could be removed from your office. It all might so open you up to lawsuits, but it also hurts the veracity of the police department, meaning that now the stories of these officers who falsify these records is now in question for everything else they plan to do and everything they've done in the past. So that's a larger sort of scope of investigation now, to sort of say, if you're lying now, were you lying before? Have you always been lying? Can I ever trust you again in the future? So it sort of undermines the credibility, and that tells you what type of people they're enlisting right now with HSI or with ICE to do this patrolling, so much that when they get ready to make a report about what happened, they have to lie to make it be substantial enough to process.
Alan, there are reports that the rapid felony dismissals really come off as a major embarrassment for Trump's appointed U.S. attorney for Southern California, Bill Asalee. And it appears to be the result of an unusual series of missteps by the Justice Department. Is this also an example of folks in the job that may not be up to the job?
So I think there's two ways to look at that. And I say the answer is yes. And correctly, yes. But also understand that for those individuals who were charged with a felony, who had to hire lawyers to go to court, they have not been made whole. So the individual protesters are still damaged, right? They may have lost their jobs. They may have lost the ability to have a job. Forever, they're going to always be correcting the record of saying, I was arrested, then this got dismissed, right? It sort of opens up to you having to check a box continually. So let's not just say that it shows the incompetence of those individuals, but let's also recognize the harm to the individuals who are doing their constitutional rights. And hopefully some of them may have claims. It's really hard to file these claims these days with these immunities, may have claims against the government with regards to their jobs, their livelihood, and their reputations.
I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, what does it mean to make them whole? These are folks who, were protesting. They were exercising their First Amendment right, and as a result, were hauled off, and were in the process of being charged, and it turns out that they were telling the truth the whole time, and I think.
For them to get it dismissed, they had to be before a judge, so they had to be charged. So for them they had to have been arrested and charged. So, I mean, that's were you arrested is an application question that you're going to have to answer all times.
So they were arrested, they were charged. What does it look like to make them whole? What are some of the potential remedies that we might see to make them whole?
Yeah, so this is a new area of law that people are going to have to work on this corrective area because part of it is restitution, right? It could be financially to make them whole because in some ways you can go back and change the record. That's really the problem. Once, John, Representative John was hit with a brick. Martin Luther King was shot. All these things and stuff. You can't go back and correct that. There's no corrective action to the moment to which you were falsely arrested and put in prison, and no amount of money is going to make you whole for that. And nor is it going to change your reputation in your community if you lost your job. So I think it's very difficult. That's why the standards should be higher in these arrests, specifically with U.S. citizens and protesters. Right? They did this as a deterrent to make sure that people who are protesting know that if you say this, then you will get arrested. And then when they arrested these people, they had to lie about what they were doing to get them through the process. At the same time, you have a story in California, I think it is in California, where there are these two landscapers that ran into a medical facility, and the medical facility asked for a warning. They didn't have the warning. They got in the way of this arrest, and now they're being charged with the felony, right? These two healthcare aides in California who were basically at job. Someone, their landscapers ran in. They tried to protect them, asked for a warning. They said no. So what you see from the government is the same thing you see in the immigrant community is this fear tactic. And what I'm trying to say to you is I'm not sure exactly how the remedies are going to work out, but you should know what's involved when you take actions of it getting in the way, because the action of getting in the way may cost you something. And that's okay because it cost Dr. King something. It cost protesters something. It cost John Lewis something. All those people went to jail. All those people have records about it, but it does cost something in those situations.
The Justice Department, these cases were dismissed in the interest of justice. I'd never really sort of seen that kind of language sort of used in the dismissal. How common is that? Or is that something noteworthy?
I think it's pretty common. I think you probably don't get the light where it sees it all the time, but I mean, I'm sure around some of the other protests that happen along the way that it might not have happened, or things that were done inappropriate. Like, for example, they didn't get the Miranda rights or something. There are a lot of times in which that conversation covers a lot of things in general, but it also makes it seem as if it's a blanket dismissal rather than saying to the officers, you really screwed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says the interest of justice, not you didn't do your job the correct way.
Oh, I see. I see. Interesting. Interesting. In other news, we know that these ICE raids are scaring off LA workers rebuilding some of the fire-torn areas around here. I don't know if you saw this tweet that went viral of basically Stephen Miller tweeting at LA Mayor Karen Bass, really saying that, LA should, already been fixed up from the fires, and because of the mayor's incompetence, and I'm paraphrasing, incompetence related to managing immigration issues here. That's part of the reason why the federal government's had to act. Look, we know that these ICE raids will continue to have an impact on our local economy, on our economy across the country. Talk to us about why that argument is not cutting through the noise, particularly among Republicans right now. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans that own businesses that run in large part because of cheap labor, the labor of undocumented folks, many of which are in line to be a part of the rebuild of places like Altadena and the Palisades. Talk to us about why this issue isn't making its way to the surface, particularly among Republicans.
So I think let's separate a couple of issues. The first issue that we should talk about is that a lot of the workforce the work site enforcement actions are going down, right? So they're not arresting people at the job. They're arresting people at the immigration courts where they're coming back, or they're arresting people on the streets. And one should ask themselves, why have you changed the procedure in which you're arresting people? And you kind of know why, right? You don't want to have a job. You don't want the owner of the company to be indicted. You don't want to have this sort of smear of this company having undocumented people and open up the liability. So that's one concept that's sort of happening there. Number two, the country was founded on people working, enslaved individuals. It has always been a part of our workforce. It is the reason why we have not had an Immigration Act, because that exists, right? So, it would be foolish of us to think that if we knew there were 11 million undocumented people here, that we don't think they're working in some capacity with everything that some of us do, right? Especially when we see them every place. So if the government wanted to address that, they would give them status so they would have rectification to go to the courts to say, wait a minute, I'm not getting what I need. I need to file a claim. I'm not getting paid the right wages. Wages could be higher. the story that the undocumented people are driving down the minimum wage is something that's peculiar to me because the minimum wage has been the same for the last 20 years, right? It's been $7.25 or something of that matter. And if Congress wanted to change it, Congress could. And as you've seen, many states have changed it. So if Congress has increased their own wages, then why haven't they increased those wages? So I tell you that to say that it is a choice. It is a knowledge-based decision to look the other direction. Because even if President Trump today were able to remove 3,000 people a day, he's still not going to reach 1 million people. He's on target right now to tie or to just go a little bit above President Obama, which is right around 250, 260,000 individuals in removal for the year. His goal, Stephen Miller's goal, was to do 1 million. So that's that. The next thing that I want to say is we have to move away from this bait and fool conversations. This administration has baited the Democratic Party with undocumented people and immigration for the last 5 years. We need to stop taking that foolishness and change it around. The reason why California hasn't not been rebuilt or isn't being rebuilt has something to do with some of the government funding that happened and some of the government structures that stepped in to overdo rights that were going on in the state, as well as the disruption to the California economy by removing people who are able to work in the California economy. California does not issue passports, nor do they issue visas. So if there are immigrants that are in California that are undocumented, it is the fault of the federal government, not California. So that's rule one basic. So don't point at a mayor and say you're not doing something with immigration when immigration is a federally restricted thing. They don't issue visas and they don't issue passports. So your failure to do your job, which led to the great economy that California has, is not California's fault. It is your fault. So we need to move away from this constant bait from the president, even in Scotland, talking about immigrants and saying all these harsh things. Part of what the Democratic Party or just a regular American needs to come back to say is that every immigrant is not that 1% that might have a crime or that was involved in an accident. There are other immigrants that are good immigrants that are doing jobs that are paying taxes, because once we remove them, we're not going to have the workforce we have right now. And if you look at the age brackets, this is something that Stephen Miller has studied. At the age brackets, most of the people 30 or below are Latino. And when you remove that Latino workforce, you're changing the dynamics of the electorate going forward, and that's the direct disruption they're trying to cause. That's why they're also telling you, if you're in a mixed status family, meaning someone's undocumented, someone is not documented, you both can be removed, so that now you're both out of the country.
More with Alan Orr. He is schooling us on all things immigration, all things that we need to know. When we come forward, more from Alan. Plus, Etsy is facing a user boycott over immigration detention center merch. We're going to get Alan's reaction to that and more. You're listening to and streaming a More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.